Okay, Harman, you had something you want to talk about with Carson Soucy week to week. And it's so funny because I was at Faber's wedding and I was playing catch up and I almost missed that Soucy was even hurt, but that he was out week to week. Like, this didn't look good when we saw the injury. Obviously, he gets tied up with Igor Sharangovich in Calgary in that game that they played, the final preseason game at Rogers Arena. Exactly what you don't want to see in the final game of the preseason, and it looks like it's going to be a while without Carson Soucy here. What do you think about all this?
Yeah, and there's still some moving parts because the Canucks only skated with five defensemen at practice. So they're presumably before the game tomorrow still is going to be more roster juggling, perhaps an emergency recall for somebody like Akito Hirose. But look, in the big picture, this is the first big test of this team's blue line depth because, yeah, it's unfortunate to lose Soucy early in the year, especially tough schedule. You're on the road, so you're not going to be able to dictate matchups in terms of not having last changes much. But it's inevitable that over the course of the season, you're going to run into a lot of injuries and you're going to be leaning on your Akito Hiroses, your Noah Juulsens, Cole McWards, Guillaume Brisebois, that Christian Wallanen's, like that tier of depth defensemen. And it's so fascinating because down the stretch last season, that tier of defensemen, all of them looked pretty good. And we looked at it and went, wow, especially since it had happened under Tocchet in the last 30 games, you're going, man, this could be different. And you maybe don't worry as much if this team runs into blue line injuries, at least in the bottom of the lineup. But the fact of the matter is, through training camp and preseason, it's been a little bit shakier, and I've been a little bit unimpressed with the fact that whether it's a Wolanin or a Juulsen, that tier of defensemen, a couple of those guys I expected a little bit more of, and so we'll see, because if they fare at the level that they did down the stretch last season, right? If Hirose comes in and he plays like he did in the whatever 4 or 5 games that he got into, then you're not really worried about weathering a short-term Soucy injury, especially because the way Tocchet had been rolling the D pairs through camp preseason, it's not as if they had been using Soucy exclusively next to Hughes and he's playing in the top four. Now you've got this big hole next to Hughes. Soucy looked as if he could have potentially been starting on a third pair. And from that standpoint, if you get that version of Hirose, if he's the guy that gets called up, or if Brisebois ends up being ready and he's the one that goes, then you're fine. But look, I'm a little bit nervous overall about the state of the club's blue line depth. I don't know. It feels like you have a lot of options, but I just don't feel comfortable. I mean, you even look at a guy like Matt Irwin, who played 61 NHL games last season for the Capitals, and yet he comes in and he gets lit up in preseason. And it's like, okay, I'm less confident in him as a depth option than I was before camp started. So we'll see. And it's why I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't make a waiver claim for somebody like a Dylan Coughlin or a Zach Bogosian. So I'm a little bit surprised that they haven't made a depth trade. And honestly, that's the strongest counter argument for the whole, why did you give up a draft pick for Sam Lafferty? Honestly, the strongest counter argument is, well, that asset should have potentially gone to bolstering your depth on the blue line instead. So we'll see how things progress. It's honestly a legit question. Although the good news, of course, is Soucy's coming back sooner. So
Yeah, we saw him on the ice today. Skated on his own, so definitely a very, very good sight to see.